Welcome back, everybody. This week, we're going to have a conversation with Chris. I'm super excited to have him on the show. Chris, welcome to the show.
Good to be here.
Awesome. We were just having a wonderful conversation as we're warming up before this. So with that said, we're ready to go right into it. So kick us off with a one-word open.
Transition.
Transition. I love it. I don't think anyone has ever used that in the last 160 episodes that we've done ourselves. So that's cool.
Glad I could add something new.
I love it. All right. Take the next few minutes. Tell us about Chris, who you are, what you stand for, and also talk about your business, how you got it started at a high level, where you are at today, who you help, and how do you help them?
So Chris Oltyan, CEO of Compliable, and it has been quite a journey. So we're a 5-year-old company. We have gone through a good number of pivots, the pandemic necessitating a pretty dramatic one. But my background is starting up companies. I worked actually in the gaming industry, the video gaming industry, did some titles for Pokemon, Riot Games, Bethesda Softworks, Chuck Lorre Productions, Big Bang Theory, did something over there. So my role in that was producer, which in the gaming industry is person responsible for making sure that that thing ships in a somewhat timely fashion. And anything from helping with code to making placeholder assets to whatever needed to happen to make that thing go, and then transitioned into the live teams to make sure the thing ran effectively over time. Took that experience on infrastructure, worked with some Fortune 500s after that, to help them spin up and move their infrastructure into the cloud. And then, after selling your soul for a while, you get a pretty good return on investment, but you shave those outer edges and you're okay. And then you kind of thunk into a meaty bit and you're like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to grow that back. So kind of looked to get back into the entrepreneurial scene. And also, just as a random aside, for the Fortune 500s that I worked with, all of them were actually featured by John Oliver in a focus segment, which isn't a good thing, just as a note. So went back to the space, originally started as Rebrick, and we'll kind of show you the evolution of the logo. That was us when we started. We're now the Compliable. We went through Techstars. You may have noticed that too. But so yeah, it was a wild ride, and it was mostly finding that product market fit. And I think that was really top of mind, because transition, the word I used was, we went from an HR product to a financial services product to now in the real money transaction space, gaming, working with a different set of gaming, casinos, sports books, lotteries, people who have to get licensed in all these different places, and we help them get licenses.
What a wild ride. Tell us about licensing. Is that a hard thing to get?
So the gaming industry is crazy. You have to understand that the reason why a lot of the regulators exist in gaming is to prevent mafia and organized crime control of gaming, which means that it's not like just a check. It's not just a tax thing. It is super critically invasive of your privacy and doing a bunch of stuff there. Questions like, you were married. Well, that's cool. Who was your wife? Did she remarry? Who did she remarry? Where did you go to high school? Can I see your high school transcript? Oh, I see you dated Sarah over there. She's now in, tied to some Russian oligarchs. Are you sure nothing else is going on there? Incredibly detailed stuff that has to do. And when you think it's not just filling out a form, it is filling out a 66-page form to start with, followed on with maybe a couple hundred pages of supporting documentation. And to add to the complexity of all this, that's different for every state. And above and beyond that, it's different for every jurisdiction. Because not only do you have to deal with 50 unique states and regulatory environments, you also have hundreds of Native American casinos and jurisdictions as well. So, we spoke to somebody who had 475 licenses in order to operate his business in distinct jurisdictions, each one a unique form. And when you get to that scale, it just becomes a nightmare.
I had no idea. And I can't even imagine the nightmare that you were just kind of speaking to at a high level. What about for those listening and they're looking to get licensed, what's your number one advice you could give to them right now as they're listening to this?
Make sure you don't launder any money or have ties to organized crime. Step one. And step two, like, be prepared for a level of scrutiny that you have not encountered in other industries. Maybe if you've been in cannabis, you've like run into this, but the issue with the multi-jurisdictional aspect of things are, if you're an online provider, like that means all your CS people have to get licensed in 5 different states. It means all your engineers have to get licensed in, 3 or 4 different states. All your executives and officers have to get licensed in, 20 states. And your investors, if somebody owns more than 5% of your company, your investors now need to get licensed. And let me tell you, asking your investors to put like every single investment in their portfolio onto a form that you can submit on their behalf can get a little dicey. So just be aware the regulatory burden for going into this space is huge. That's if you're one of the big players and operator, your FanDuels and Caesars of the space.
It's kind of crazy. I kind of had an idea, a general idea that it's not exactly easy who you help, but what I didn't have a concept of is if you want to sell, you have to also go through this whole process. That's crazy.
Well, yeah. So the major operators have that. If you want to sell to one of those major operators, you don't have to go quite through that level of vetting, but you do have to go through a level of vetting. So if you are a vendor in the space, if you want to serve ads to FanDuel, you have to get licensed in 8 different states, 9, 10 now different states, and it's changing all the time. So kind of to back up, this industry did not exist in the US as of 2018. That was when the PAPSA law was struck down, which was a law that allowed basically Las Vegas and New Jersey, for all practical purposes, to keep a monopoly on gaming. Like they got grandfathered in. Certainly no lobbying efforts were made there to protect their interests because, whatever. But when it went to the Supreme Court, they were like, no, you're not special. You can't be the only places that get to do this. Everyone can pass their legislation. So, and that's kind of a confusing bit, right? It wasn't that the law allowed gaming. The law struck down the prohibition from other states setting up their own gaming regulations, which means like it's not controlled at the federal level, it's state by state. So the second that law went down, a couple states went online, but over the past 3-4 years, it's been states passing regulation with the legislation, then that going to regulators, figuring out an agency to kind of supervise this, that agency creating their own forms and processes and licensing procedures, and then publishing them and getting feedback and going through these iterations. Like Tennessee changed the agency that was managing gaming at the beginning of this year. They had been in operation for a year, and then they just changed the requirements. They kept the same name of some of the licenses, but now it's completely different. And if you weren't in that loop, like we have a customer who ended up, before they were on the platform, they were like, oh, well, we just did all this. And we're like, you didn't have to do that. It's like, well, the state took $500 from me for the license. And we're like, yeah, you didn't need that anymore. And it's just such a crazy field that's moving so fast. It is a wild west. People have no idea what's going on or what will be going on in a year from now. And it's kind of an exciting place to be.
That's where you guys come in, right? That's how you help them.
Yeah. So for those vendors, like tracking all the changes, where do you need a license? How do you even work with a major book? And then for the operators, they'll have hundreds of customer support people that need to get licenses in multiple places. If you're a compliance officer and you have to follow up with like 20 people every week to fill out 150 pages of license forms all told together, and they can't work until they have those licenses, because if they do and the regulator finds out that somebody spoke to a CS person and they weren't licensed, like you can get heavy fined or even have your license lost. And for the operators, like I mentioned $500 as a vendor, you get that a couple different places. Some places charge you more, some places charge you less, but all told 7-8K, you can be up and running in the gaming space as a vendor. If you're an operator, your Illinois license alone, for the privilege of being able to offer sports betting in the state is $10 million for the initial application. And then it's $500,000 every 4 years for renewal. So like, it's pretty significant if something puts your license at risk. That's a large investment on your part.
Wow, that's really eye-opening. Let's shift gears over to thought leadership. I would love to hear your point of view on what you think are the top 3 things that make someone an awesome thought leader.
I think, I mean, I'm biased because I'm bitter and jaded, but like, I know there are people who are professional speakers and they are great at it. To me, that's not really a thought leader. That is somebody who's good at, riding a wave that's kind of going. I think a good thought leader sees the wave before anybody else is riding it, like knowing what's happening in the space, knowing the shape of what's to come, and being able to guide people through that. It's like, no, don't ride that wave. It'll crush you. Here's how we can navigate this in an effective way. Someone who's not just on the bandwagon, I think is kind of a key aspect of that. And, somebody who's just comfortable with the topic, right? And to me, comfort comes from knowing what you don't know. Like, yes, you should know a lot of it. And I guess that's the last part, is you should also know what you don't know about it, and not encourage and or say things that are, vague or future looking is always future looking. There's going to be some hedging there. But if you don't know something, like being confident in presenting it, because like, let's be honest, there are many people out there who speak and walk and talk in a manner that projects confidence, which they have to do in order to be a leader in any capacity, but not knowing when to turn that off and to be able to say, okay, here's a place we're going to let somebody else kind of walk forward. I'll walk with you and I'll help you get along there. But, I'm not going to be the best person for this particular instance. I really have a lot of respect for that, because too many times I have seen people get into trouble by trying to be everything all the time, and nobody is.
That was, I think it's the best way. It was well said, and it's the best way to kind of define it. So I appreciate that. Let's talk about company culture. I know you've worked really hard to develop your company culture, and it's hitting its stride. Tell us, if another leader is listening right now and they're really struggling to get their culture down, what's the one tip you could give them that'll help them get an immediate, positive return, so to speak, in terms of better culture in their organization?
As much as I hate the word, because I think it's so overused, but authenticity, like the disconnect between what you say you're going to do and what you actually do, to me, that's authenticity, right? It's that gap that will kill any attempt that you have to implement a good culture. If you say, this is what we're going to do, but we're not going to do it, but it certainly sounds good when we put it on our website, everybody who works for you is going to be like, that's kind of lame. Because the next step, once you have some authenticity and some, clout, is intention. Like, you have to direct your culture. Like it's not your culture will evolve organically if you don't do anything with it. But that just basically means, crapshoot. It's like, oh no, everything went to hell. How did that happen? It's because you weren't actively there to guide your culture in a direction that would be positive for your company. And that's not the same everywhere. Like, we have some very specific things. We have spoken with people who, looking at our company, were like, I don't think I'd be comfortable with that. We have a remote first space right now. Like, I'm in an office. I can fit 2 other people in here, and I'm the only one here 9 times out of 10. We're located all across the US, and that's a different experience. If you like an office culture and environment, which is cool, I like them, but that's not what we're developing here. So you have to understand what you're going for, and then find people who want to encourage and expand that culture, because culture is kind of its own immune system, right? You find people who want to support that culture, and if you guide it in a certain direction, it weeds out people who won't thrive there. And that's okay. You don't have to have everybody love working there. You have to have a group of people who love working there, and large enough pool, diverse enough pool, that you'll be able to surmount all the issues and problems that you come across.
I don't know if the audience picked up on this, but I certainly did. I see a book in the making there in culture. I think you just defined it so well. So if you ever need an idea to write a book, just come back and listen to this episode, and you'll say, "Oh my God, I should write a book on culture. It'll be so easy for you." In addition to everything else, what I'm trying to say is thank you for that. I appreciate it. So here we are at the end. We've had a really good opportunity to understand who you are, what your company does, and I know there's a lot of listeners that want to find out more information. So take this opportunity to give out your social handles and your website address in case they want to find out more information.
So Chris Oltyan on LinkedIn, Oltyan. I'll be the only one. Compliable, and we're posting most of our stuff on LinkedIn. We have a Twitter, a Compliable Twitter, so that exists. I personally try to at least post 3 to 4 times a year on Twitter. So follow me there. You'll get those updates, but probably not so important. And yeah, just our website, compliable.com. We were very happy when we got the domain. It was a journey. But yeah, that has some basic info. We'll be launching a new one here coming up in a little bit. So yeah, we're just excited to be in this transition space and going from startup to small company. And that's why it's top of mind for me, because it impacts culture, it impacts how we do work, it impacts what work we do. And it's been on top of mind every day, every hour.
Awesome. There you have it, folks. This is Chris from Compliable, and he's going to sign us off with a one-word close. Go ahead, Chris.
Hours.
Why
Need more of them, use all of them.
Good stuff, man. Hey, thanks for coming on to the show.